are claiming that they have evidence that Assad is about to use chemical weapons in an attack on the city of Idlib in Syria. This is like basically the last stronghold for the rebels that are in Syria that Assad and Russia is fighting. This whole story is a mess for several reasons. It seems obvious to me from the get-go. One of the reasons I really liked Trump was that during the second debate, I think, he kind of went off script and was like, yeah, why are we fighting Russia and Syria in Syria when we're backing what seems to be terrorists, which is absolutely true. We know that these so-called rebels, just like in Libya, are actually al-Nusra, other extreme Islamic terrorist groups that we're sending weapons to, backing. We actually have troops there protecting these people. Yet we continue to do this in country after country, and no one ever questions it. So the fact that Trump was questioning it, I actually thought was a good thing. Of course, he later goes back on his stance because every news channel, including conservative news outlets, start just bashing him repeatedly, including, the Party of Peace, the Democrats. They're foaming at the mouth. How dare he? How dare he say this? Remember, Hillary's proposed solution there was to have a no-fly zone, which would have led to a direct conflict with Russia, because basically we're telling Russia, you're not allowed to fly over Syria, which would have been a big deal. So anyways, there's kind of a timeline of what's going on here. You have to understand that we've accused Assad of gassing his own people several times. There was supposedly a gas attack in 2017, which Trump and the U.S. launched a few bombs over that. I'll link an article below. Mattis admits in February 2018, oops, our bad. We don't have any proof that Assad did that. Didn't stop us from dropping bombs in. Then there was another attack supposedly in April of 2018. The exact same script. Oh, there was a chemical attack. Now, supposedly Assad, who's winning this war, it's just about over. The only chance he has to lose is to be internationally condemned by basically every country in the world. But supposedly, despite that he's winning this with conventional weapons, he just decides to gas his people whatsoever, for whatever reason. And so supposedly he does this again, and the U.S. comes out and they're like, oh yeah, Trump starts dropping bombs. To my shame, I thought it was terrible. I thought it was the worst point in Trump's presidency. Starts dropping these bombs in Syria, and we have no evidence at this point. There hasn't even been an investigation by any international body that there even was a chemical attack. And then noted journalist who's won all sorts of Pulitzer Prizes, Robert Fisk, goes over, starts talking to people. He's convinced there wasn't even a chemical attack. The OPCW comes out and they kind of are mealy-mouthed several months later about like, well, there definitely wasn't sarin. There might have been chlorine used, but we don't know who's to blame whatsoever. Now, to me, it makes sense that it would probably be the rebels who had the best excuse for using these weapons, because, and even Fisk's interviews of local people say they're discussing how terrible these rebels are. They're actually terrorists, not rebels. But it doesn't make any sense at all for Assad to use these chemical weapons at all. He's going to win. It will be done by the end of the year. So why would he risk this? And considering that we've already seen in 2017 the U.S. went in and attacked, later had to admit, oh, our bad, we have no proof Assad did that. Then the same script's written in 2018, we attacked before there's any proof of anything. There's no available proof whatsoever, just some claims like, yeah, we know Assad did this. Now, we're supposed to believe that the U.S. has intelligence that Assad weeks out, that Assad's given the green light. Okay, gas these people. When he's winning, it's all but over, but he's already given that green light. And we know that the terrorists have had access to these same chemical weapons. Yet we still have to believe that there's going to be this strike by the U.S. if chemical weapons are used, because we'll automatically know that it was Assad. It's absolutely ridiculous. And it just proves, we've known for years that Syria was on the regime change list. We know this. This was the establishment plan well before Trump. This was one of the things they hated about Trump. I always say that if you turn on Fox News and CNN and you see they agree on something, that's something you should be worried about. Well, isn't it funny that the only time that all of these liberal networks or liberal newspapers like the New York Times or CNN, MSNBC, the only time they praise Trump is when he's dropping bombs in Syria? And keep in mind, the Democrats are supposed to be the party of peace, right? They're not supposed to be about regime change. Only what that really means is they want regime change. They praise when their guy Obama does it, like he did in Libya, and they then pretend to be upset after a Republican like Bush does it. But in reality, they pushed every single one of those regime change wars. They pushed. And the proof is that they're cheering for Trump. That's the only time they'll praise Trump, when he's actually doing something in Syria. They clearly want a conflict with Syria and definitely want a conflict with Russia. And this is extremely scary. I mean, there is a good chance what the U.S. is saying is if this attack occurs and the U.S. responds, they will hit Syria government and Russia targets. That's basically a declaration of war. That could literally be the first step to World War III. Yet, People will go along with it with no question, just like they did in Libya. Remember, Gaddafi in Libya was telling everyone, these aren't innocent rebels. These are terrorists. These are Islamic terrorists, many of them from outside the country. Yet the U.S. is arming them for some reason. And no. Everyone just brushed it off. Now how's Libya? Oh, it's under the rule of, it went from one of the bright spots in Libya, regardless of what you think of Gaddafi, and surely he wasn't a good guy, but at least it was a stable country. Now it's a terrible place. It's overrun with terrorists. We saw what happened in Benghazi. Terrorists overran our consulate, things of that nature. This is exactly what's going on in Syria. It is the same old story that plays out again and again and again. This is what the establishment, when people talk about deep state, the intel communities and things of that nature, this is what they want constantly. They're part of this military-industrial complex, the intel complex, and the establishment politicians that constantly want these regime change wars. And they've told us this is what they want in Iran. This is what they want in Syria, right? And I voted for Trump because I thought that he was at least a possibility to stop this. Clearly, Hillary Clinton would have accelerated it just as fast as Obama, if not faster. I mean, she was trying to provoke Russia with this no-fly zone long before the election even occurred. So and make no mistake about it, even though I'm a Trump supporter, Trump's to blame for this. If he goes through with these attacks again, it's on him. I don't want to hear excuses from people like, oh, he was duped by his intel community, or, he was duped. No, and I also think it's funny that all of a sudden a lot of Trump supporters, well, when he bombs someone, it's okay. I'm so tired of this. I don't care about this team mindset. I have what I think are good policies and good ideas, and if someone follows them, I don't care if they're a Republican or Democrat. I would like that. But the same people that were against the Iraq war, all of a sudden when Obama's bombing people, oh, well, Obama's a decent guy, so these bombs must be okay. That's garbage. And it's equally garbage if people were saying that about Trump. Well, I didn't trust Obama bombing a bunch of people, but when Trump does it, it must be okay. No, we should see proof before we're launching bombs. I'm not saying that Syria couldn't use chemical weapons, but we can't go off bombing before we have any proof whatsoever. That's what we've done 2 times already in Syria. And now we're going to do that same thing a 3rd time, except this time maybe we're going to target Russia and Syrian government assets. That is unbelievably dangerous, and that's not the behavior of a country that is seeking truth and justice. That's behavior of a country that's seeking to to interfere in other countries and start wars and start regime changes. That's not what we should be as a country. So keep an eye on this news in the future. Let's see what happens, but I'm hoping that peace, the best case scenario would be that the rebels, which I feel are mostly terrorists, would decide to leave and there wouldn't be any more bloodshed whatsoever. But hopefully we can end this without chemical weapons being used. And if they are used, now remember, just real quick, what incentive, we already know the rebels had access to chemical weapons. What incentive would they have as a last-ditch effort not to use these chemicals, right? They know they're about to be wiped out, and they know that the U.S. has came out and said, if chemicals are used, we're coming in guns a-blazing. So, of course, if they have access to these chemicals as a last-ditch effort, all they would have to do is release them. We know from Robert Fisk's reporting that these aren't noble people. The people on the street talk about how brutal these terrorists are, the so-called rebels, and how they've made their life a living hell. So clearly, if this is their last-ditch effort to win, they would have every incentive to do it. So it's just a really sad situation. I think everyone should keep an eye on it. It's very worrisome, and this literally has the chance to be a flashpoint for what could start World War III. So hopefully Trump thinks about it, understands that he needs proof before he does anything, before he could start these possible wars. And just watch how it would be a shame how the Party of Peace and all these liberals that supposedly are for peace and think Trump's a crazy warmonger, watch how in the coming weeks they push for he needs to take more strong actions in Syria. He needs to confront Russia on this, and you'll see out them for what they really are. They're not a party of peace. They're just another face of the establishment that's wanted these neocon, neo-lib wars that have gone on for decades now.